you identify more as American or more as Chinese?
I do think that everyone's requirements for what they need in their life is different. There's no good way or bad way. I should leave America and see what else is out there. I really feel like I'm kind of a bridge between both.
Right. Well, today our friend Lily is going to share with us what it was like to be brought up as a Taiwanese Chinese in America and how she thinks she can become a cultural bridge between the three cultures. So remember to subscribe to Wentigram if you're interested in Chinese culture, the language, or anything related with life in China, and let's roll the video. Hi Lily, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Lily. I am Asian American and I was born in Ohio, which is a state in America. It's very boring. There's nothing to do there. And then I came to Shanghai about a little over 5-6 years ago.
And you told me that your parents are from Beijing?
My mother's from Beijing. My father's from actually a small city outside of Taipei.
Would you say, I'm not sure if it's okay to ask this question, but I don't really understand the topic. Would you say it's from different countries or not really?
I think it's something that's very controversial and it really depends on who you're asking. I think it's a matter of perspective. It's a very complicated issue that's definitely not going to be resolved in a single statement.
Yeah, of course.
But I think that there is similarities and differences as with many different areas around.
You were raised in America,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
How did your parents get to America in the first place?
My mother went there for her master's degree and my father went there for his undergraduate degree. They met at a house party in Ohio.
Oh, nice.
And they got married a couple months later. And then I was born in America.
They even have a term for this, American-born Chinese, is that it?
I did not really realize that until I was around 17. I was studying ballet for a long time and my ballet teacher was Chinese and she was screaming at me because she was saying, "You're dancing like a CBC. Are you not an ABC?" I had no idea what she was talking about.
What is a CBC and an ABC?
A Chinese-born Chinese. As you say, I was dancing like a CBC rather than an ABC, and I had no idea what she was talking about. And she asked me, "Do you know what an ABC is?" And I said, "No." And then she asked my sister, who was also a ballet dancer, and she asked her, "Do you know what an ABC is?" My sister was so scared. She said the alphabet.
The alphabet. I would think it's the alphabet
Right?
too,
You would
ABC.
think so.
So it's American-born Chinese?
American-born Chinese.
And CBC is Chinese-born Chinese, right?
With the assumption that American-born Chinese is a thing, then CBC would probably be either Canadian-born.
Would you say there's a big difference between Chinese people born in China and Chinese people born in America?
Oh, absolutely. There is a large difference. And a difference between people who are seen to be what an American is. There's a perspective of what an American is, which is usually either someone who's Caucasian or someone who is African American. They are seen as someone who could be actually American. Whereas someone like me, where every time I say that I am American, there's a question of, are you? But where are you from? But when I am in China or even in Asia, it's always an assumption that, oh, but you're not really Chinese, but you're also not really foreign. You're just kind of stuck in this no man's land of kind of being.
So it's you don't really know where you belong, or do you identify more as American or more as Chinese?
I honestly think that I am strictly in between because there is part of me where I have a lot of Western beliefs. I do consider myself a bit more liberal. Just given demographically, I would be a bit more liberal. But I understand a lot of the traditions and I believe in a lot of the traditions of Chinese culture. And I do believe that it's not West is best or China is best or Asian is best. It's really kind of in between. There's value on both sides. And even though I don't really feel like I fully belong in either camp, I really feel like I'm kind of a bridge between both.
Right. Do you ever feel pushed to choose a side?
I feel like you could see it in either way. You could see it as I am forced to choose a side or I am the best person to kind of bridge that gap. Because my mother is from the mainland. My father is from Taiwan. We all know that there's tension. So really, I should be the best person to speak on that situation. But it is a complicated situation, and I think there should be a measure of respect on both sides.
What was it like to be raised in America? Did you feel like maybe you were different the other people that surrounded you?
I think every Asian American has a very specific moment in their lives when they realize that they are not Caucasian. And I think almost every Asian American can identify that exact moment. I exactly remember that moment. For me, I was 9 years old. I was in my dance studio, and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I thought I looked like someone peed on me.
What?
That was my exact phrasing in my head. But it was because when you're a child, when you're grown and born and raised in that environment, you don't have that idea of, oh, this person is white, or there's this different kind of color in terms of race. You just think, oh, these are my friends. You don't even really have this self-image of yourself. You just think that you're like everyone else. But then when you start bringing your packed lunches to school and people are bringing peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and you're bringing like rice and, you know, let's be real, much more healthier option.
It is.
To school, and people are just kind of like, what are you eating? Like it does kind of start sparking a kind of debate in your head, like, oh, what is different? And then you get this moment of clarity when you realize that you're not quite like your other classmates, and you might have some people that are a bit more similar to you. I was very lucky. My like demographic within the region that I grew up in did have a good amount of Asian Americans, so I wasn't alone in that, and we could definitely identify in that kind of upbringing. But you definitely feel like you have to choose. Are you more American, and in American I mean Caucasian American, or are you more Asian? And you feel like you have to kind of choose one side or another. You either have to choose that you are being like quote unquote whitewashed, or you choose to be what we used to call fob, which is fresh off the boat, which is someone really...
What is whitewashed? Like you already...
Whitewashed is you are Asian in ancestry, but you completely adhere to the Caucasian version of what American is. So you are a cheerleader, you are social, you do a lot of activities that are typically associated with the Caucasian race in America, or that you are somebody who has the personality or interests of somebody who is which is typically associated with Caucasians in America? Or are you someone who is fresh off the boat, quote unquote, someone who is almost like an international student, someone who has a lot more interests or hobbies or personalities that are generally associated with people who have just come from abroad into America? So you feel like you kind of have to pick a side.
And is there like pros and cons to being one of those sides? Because you feel like you have to pick a side. And I guess there's people who choose either of those two options. So what are the pros and cons of choosing one side against the other?
I think it really depends who you're around. Because for me, like, if you are someone who is Asian American, but your entire Asian family has immigrated to like the West or America or anything, then you have at least a support system. But you have people who are saying like, oh, but you're losing your culture, you're losing your background. But then you could also have people who are saying you're assimilating easily into the culture that you have been raised in. For me, only my parents from their families went to America. So for them, I'm like a bit of an outsider. Not that they don't like me, but they definitely, I'm not involved or the personal relationships. I'm just like the outsider who kind of comes in every once in a while, says hi, and then just pieces out. But there are definitely pros and cons, but I really think it depends on how you really perceive them, because I think there are a lot of pros that can be seen as cons in other people's eyes, and there's a lot of cons that can be seen as pros in different people's eyes, and it's really all a matter of perspective rather than definite pros or cons.
But still, you, I guess, like you do have a strong influence from the Chinese side. Like in your upbringing, I guess, like you maybe celebrated the Chinese New Year.
Oh, see, I never got any red packets, which I'm very salty about.
Oh, that is, I would be salty.
Right?
You never got money?
No money. I got an allowance occasionally.
Yeah.
But more like when I did like chores, like mowing the lawn or something. I do think that my personal family was a bit more, it was not very traditional. My family didn't have any male children other than my father. So I was the mowing the lawn, carrying all the heavy stuff. I always joked to my parents that I'm the head of the house now. which makes my dad upset. But I do think that there's a lot of pressure depending on where you're always going to have a lot of pressure in different ways. So it's really just a matter of how you approach it and what you listen to and what you really think. So like for me, I try to think of myself as more of a bridge in between cultures. Like I should be the one who understands both sides rather than compares both sides and chooses which one. And I think that this world is going to be a lot more global. People are going to start mixing races a lot more.
Yeah.
And I do think that eventually there's going to be a lot more integration between different races. It's not going to be so clear cut. And I do think that like someone like me who is a bit in between cultures is going to be someone who can help kind of bridge those gaps in between.
Why did you choose to come back to your roots, and why the mainland specifically and not Taiwan?
Well, I actually went to Korea first for 2 years. I had a friend a very close friend that I grew up with who passed away a couple years ago. And his big thing was he really wanted to push me outside of my comfort zone. I'm not someone who goes out of my comfort zone very much. And he was someone very important to me. And so when he passed away, one of his things that he had always harped on about was that I should leave America and see what else is out there. And so one of the big things that we had discussed was me moving to South Korea. So when he passed away, I felt like it was the way to honor him was to move to South Korea. So I did. And then after 2 years in South Korea, I had two things kind of happen simultaneously. The first one being I found out about the principal of my current school. She is incredible. She is so knowledgeable. I admire her. So I have so much respect for her. But I found out that she was opening up a kindergarten. So I was like, I need to get in on the ground floor.
Yeah.
And the other half of that is that I was going to get married.
But not anymore?
So I had a friend who was not interested in getting married, but knew he had to get married. And he was from a high person in society. So he had a very specific requirements as to what kind of wife he had to choose. And he felt like someone like me was a good option because...
But you were not together.
We were not romantically together. But for him, I looked the part and I could act the part, and anything that I did that was a bit odd could be explained by my American heritage. And for me at that time, I was not really interested in romantic relationships, so I felt like it was just a good option. We were good friends.
So it was more of an arrangement,
It
like
was
not
just something,
romantic.
Yeah, like it was something where like he was great in a lot of ways, but I just wasn't romantically attached to him. But I didn't think that was a bad thing. I felt like that was something. My parents are not really romantic people themselves, so I felt like, okay, well, we work well together, we're good partners, so maybe that's the way to go. And so that is the reason why I moved to Shanghai.
Ah, so is he Chinese?
Yes.
Also ABC, CBC?
No, he is Shanghainese, born and kind of raised. He moved to America around high school, middle school, high school time. So he kind of grew in his formative years in America. So a bit similar to me, but in the kind of the reverse. Someone who was born outside of the States, but kind of got a lot of his formative education in the States. So he's a lovely, lovely person, but we were definitely not romantically.
I've realized that sometimes in China, not for everybody, but for some people, marriage is more of an arrangement. It's like we fit well together. We don't really know each other, but why don't we just get married and we're gonna make it work? Because I feel like some people think that first you have to have the conditions for love to really grow. And it's a cultural point of view.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it's wrong. Would you say that you were raised with this upbringing?
I don't think my parents gave me any expectations. Like, I've had relationships where it has been highly emotional but highly impractical. And I have had relationships where it's highly practical but not very romantic, not very emotional. I do think that in the West, it does seem like there's this idea that you need to be madly in love with your partner. You need to have so much emotional connection with them, and it has to last throughout your entire life, which that is so long. Like, it could be like 50, 70, 80 years. And I don't know if that's possible. I don't know. Really don't know if that's possible. Whereas on the other side, there is this idea that you look at your demographics. Are you compatible in that way? And the emotions may not necessarily be quite as strong, but you are a true partnership. You work well together. Your families are united. Your personalities are compatible. You work like an actual partnership, and you have decided on that person. I mean, I think there's a lot of studies that show that the physical or the emotional aspect of a relationship only goes so far. And there has to be this third side where you have to decide that that is the person that you want to be with your entire life. And that is something that is sometimes missing in this kind of Western kind of side of relationships, where they really depend on the emotion, but the emotions don't always last throughout your entire life, especially if they are not a couple who has decided on that person that they are with. They have made a decision that I'm going to make it work with this person. And there's a lot of pros and cons to that. Like, you can decide on a person and then realize later that they have a lot of red flags, and that maybe you're just going to stick it out because you've already made that decision, which obviously we know is not a positive thing, because then you're staying with someone who is very toxic, or someone who it's just not compatible with you. But on the other side, if you're someone who has not decided on a person and you're relying on that emotional connection, like, that's not a connection that you can't feel that way for the rest of your life. And once you stop feeling that way, are you just gonna leave to chase the next, spark in your life? That doesn't bring you any stability in your life. So I do think that everyone's requirements for what they need in their life is different. There's no good way or bad way, but given the traditional sense of relationships, you kind of need a bit of both sides. You need someone who you have an emotional connection with, but you need someone that you have decided on. You have made a strategical, logical decision on this person, that this is the person I want to build my life with.
And would you be open, let's say, to have a relationship with someone in a strategical way? Someone that is aligned to your objectives, to what the things that you want to have, your quality of living, and maybe having kids, but also to have this other partnership where it's more of like for yourself. Like, nowadays, these open relationships, would you be open to that?
When I was considering getting married to the person who was not really interested in getting married, we did discuss having kind of like people on the side to fulfill a lot of our emotional side. But since we decided not to continue with our kind of goal, the way that I am now, I think that open relationships work for some people, and they can be highly beneficial for some people. For me personally, I don't think so. What I am looking for, and what I hope that I have found, is someone that has decided on me, but we work really well, and there is a really strong emotional connection as well. I want everything. I'm so greedy.
But how has it been for you dating in America versus dating in China?
Let's say China. I have met men who are Chinese men who are born and raised here, and they are not always the best at accepting. It really depends, because I do think everyone is different, but the ones that I have encountered have been a bit resistant to my more liberal ideas. They haven't been very open to me having male friends or having a life outside of them. They do tend to want, and I do say tend very liberally because these are just my examples. I don't think they apply to every Chinese man out there, but they do tend to have this idea of what a girlfriend or wife will be, which is someone whose life kind of revolves a bit more around them. So my Western side can be a bit jarring for them. And on the flip side, I have met some foreign men who tend to have this idealized version of what an Asian woman is, which I have no idea where it comes from, because there's this idea that Asian women are quiet and submissive and very, 听话, very obedient, and I have no idea where this comes from, because have you seen an IE on these streets? Like
they're the boss.
They're the boss.
They control the paycheck.
Oh, where this idea comes from, but there's a lot of foreign men who kind of have this idea of what Asian women are, and I dislike that very much, because I don't feel like I am that kind of person. If that's what you're looking for and that's what you need, by all means. Do I think that you should attach that to a certain race? No. But if that is the kind of person you're looking for, like, okay, sure, it has nothing to do with me. But I do find that dating can be a bit complicated because I'm not really in either camp, which can be seen as both a negative and a positive. It is, if it is someone who's looking for a very specific type, they have associated with a certain race, I might not fit into that. And I'm not really willing to compromise in that kind of way. But if they're looking for someone who is a bit more in between, who kind of in between those two cultures, who can at least understand either side, then maybe that would be someone who
You would be
is more compatible with me.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, because it must not be easy. Like making friends here is not easy in a way.
I think making friends can be built off of hobbies and interests, and let's be real, people that you mutually hate. But I do remember my very first American-born Chinese friend, this Asian American. I didn't even realize that that was a piece that was missing in my life. She came into my life about 2 years into my life in Shanghai, and she recognized it right away. She just kind of grasped onto me, and I didn't think much of it. But the more that we chatted, and the more that I realized that this person had a lot of commonalities with myself and the way that we were brought up, and we could share all those stories and not be judged for it. She is one of my best friends right now. Like, we are very, very close because we have some differences, absolutely, but we have a lot of similarities in terms of the way that we view things and a lot of the ways that we were raised.
She's American-born Chinese, right?
Technically, was born in Vietnam, but she was raised in America.
So would you say you tend to gravitate more to people who have this common background of yours? Or do you feel just as comfortable with American people, Chinese people, or ABCs, CBCs?
I think it's not necessarily about the race. It's about like the values and the commonalities between people, because I don't think you can associate certain qualities to a certain race. So with her, yes, absolutely, we connected in a lot of similarities in our background, but it doesn't mean that every ABC is going to connect with each other. And the flip side, like my partner is Australian. I'm not Australian whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we clearly get along well. We have a lot of things that we believe in terms of values that match up, but it has nothing to do with our race.
Of course.
My friends can be from a lot of parts of the world. It's more, I think, about the values rather than the place that you're from. But I do think, I do acknowledge that, like, sometimes where you're from can have a big influence.
Yeah, you have some things to talk about, like you can relate to some things. And how did you meet your partner? Because he's from Australia and you met in China.
Our mutual friends' apartment. Our mutual friends were roommates, and I had already known about him. I met him very briefly once because my friend had forgotten her outfit for this event that we were going to, and so we went back to her apartment. He was just there on the couch, and he was hungover, and he wasn't chatty at all. And I just thought, okay, like, he's cute, okay, but he didn't want to chat with me at all. So I didn't really think much of it. And then we actually met at, like, a Christmas Eve party, kind of at the same apartment. I still didn't think he was interested in me, but apparently he was.
How did you find out?
Our mutual friends really were the people who brought it together, because I think given our personalities, neither of us would have made like a real first move. So it really is a lot of credit needs to go to our mutual friends. We're kind of bridging.
So you kind of let her know, and then you went there, and she's like, hey.
Yeah, and then his friend kind of came over and said, oh, like, you know, he's interested.
We think foreigners see that dating in China it's kind of complicated. We don't really know how Chinese people get together. Like, sometimes it's fixed, sometimes it's like they're introduced.
Yes.
How does it work, and how has it worked for you?
From what I can gather from Chinese citizens in China who have been raised here as well, that dating is different from the West. It's not quite so open, I assume. When you date, that's your intention, is to kind of have a serious relationship. It's from the get-go. You don't have to have a conversation where you're defining the relationship like you are in the West.
Yeah.
In the West, you can kind of see each other, or it can be a one-off time, or it doesn't have to be serious until you have that conversation. You make that final decision. But in in China generally, and there are definitely exceptions where people have one-night stands or anything, but generally when you have decided to get together, you are officially dating. There's no wishy-washiness to it where you're, oh, we're dating, or are we just seeing each other? What's the difference between the two? It's just, okay, we're dating with the intention of marriage rather than let's figure it out together. But sometimes it doesn't work, and then you're like, okay, well, that didn't work, so let's try the next one. But there is still this goal of marriage.
So there's no fooling around. It's more like straight to the point.
There are definitely people who fool around, but I think that generally it's a bit more straightforward.
You were living in America. I guess you graduated in America, and then you chose to come to China. What do you do here, and how do you like it?
I manage a team of foreign teachers here at a bilingual kindergarten. I was working in Korea prior to this as an English teacher. I mean, I'm American born. I am Asian, which definitely does not help my case when looking for jobs. But I have found a lot of people who have been very open and very understanding to the fact that I may look Asian, but I do speak English fluently, and I am qualified at least at the same level to kind of teach English to children as well. I found out that my principal was opening up her own kindergarten. She was internationally famous, so I was super excited to get in on the ground floor. I was very lucky to kind of get in, and I have kind of grown with the company over the last 5 and 6 years. I am now like managing head teacher and manager of my foreign team. I kind of lead them and kind of guide them. I'm currently doing evaluations and telling them which ones are okay, which ones need a little revision. But I love my team very much. I don't feel like I'm a natural leader, but I do have a great love for a lot of my teachers, and I love them as people, and I want to see them grow as educators. And that really is my job, is to really support my teachers. It's not my job to lead them. It's really my job to give them the support that they need to do the job that they are tasked to do to the best of their ability.
Would you say there's more opportunities in America for you specifically, or in China?
I think it depends on what I want to do. As a teacher, I think, in all honesty, being a teacher in America is very difficult. The pay is not great.
So the pay is better in China?
It might be comparable in China, but with the cost of living, it is.
Yeah.
I would say
Because China is not that bad.
China is a place that has a bad reputation for how wonderful it is. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I think there's a lot of good things going for it that gets kind of glanced over and forgotten based on this big bad wolf reputation that it seems to have with the West, which I do think is a bit unfair. Being someone who's in between, I do feel like it is a bit unfair. I love my teachers. I love my job. I would never be a teacher in the States. Not only is it like the pay, it's not about the pay. There's a lot of pressure from parents who want the entire world and will not accept the human aspect of it or the realities of it. And I do think that it is dangerous to be a teacher in the States with the statistics of mass shootings. Like, when you really look at the statistics, I don't want to be a teacher who has to risk my life to save a child. I would die for my children that I have now, but I don't want to be forced to in order to save a child of a parent who would not appreciate that sacrifice.
And China's like super safe. I mean, at least in my experience, it's safe that I can't even believe how safe it is.
I am a single, for a long time I was a single woman. Now I'm still a woman who generally lives alone in China, and it is safe. I can walk around at night, and I cannot say the same in America. I love America very much, but as a woman, if I was by myself, I would not feel safe walking around in a lot of these cities, which is not the same for China. I feel fine walking around at night in China.
Yeah, we also feel the same about life in China. We love it very much, and it has been a really interesting interview. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.